Many leftists fail to understand why a leftist would be antagonistic towards another leftist. They fail to understand that some supposed leftists are an enemy. They have this simplistic worldview of left versus right. If this simple game of left versus right is true, surely the left should not infight. The issue, of course, is that unfortunately politics is not that simple, and there is no shortage of evil to be found on the political left. The right ultimately contains more evil than the left, but the left is far from universally good. Problematic leftists are plentiful. One great example of one such problematic leftist is the Tankie. Note that when I say Tankie, I do not mean all the Marxist-Leninists. I mean authoritarian leftists who admire and defend murderous dictatorships. Some non-lefty Tankies will bend over backwards to insist we be nice and have unity with the Tankies. They seem to believe that Tankies are allies of the more reasonable, libertarian, socialist type leftists. Tankies can sometimes be allies in some very specific situations, but most of the time they are nothing but enemies. They have failed to grasp what the Tankies really are, and the many threats they pose to any decent form of leftism. Tankies are not only not allies, they are in many ways enemies. It is my belief that left-leaning liberals are greater allies of the left than Tankies ever will be, and that is saying something. Why would I make these unfortunately controversial anti-Tankie claims? It is simple, really. The Tankies are bad and worthy of great disdain for a number of reasons. Tankies are not friends, but instead enemies for a range of reasons. For starters, Tankies are an optical nightmare. They openly embrace right-wing lies about the left as they admire totalitarianism, autocracy, and defend and adore the likes of Stalin. They make leftism look horrible to the average person and are therefore strategically and optically disastrous. Due to these strategic blunders alone, we should dislike the Tankies, but the optical nightmare caused by Tankie idiocy is only the beginning. Tankies cannot be trusted as they do not value anything representing real socialism. They make this very obvious when they show their conception of a socialist nation as a totalitarian hell state such as North Korea. We can see what the Tankies want as an end goal through the sorts of countries that they defend and idolize. The Tankie loves violence and authoritarianism and constantly defends violent and authoritarian regimes. They glorify bloody and murderous revolution, with pathetic fantasies about leading the proletariat in what is not so much a moral and humanitarian pursuit, but instead a cult of personality and an almost theatrical game of reds and yellows, with any real socialism nowhere to be seen. They openly adore murderous dictatorships, reminding us quite effectively what their end goal is. On top of this, the Tankies are shockingly anti-intellectual. They dismiss literally any information they dislike as Western propaganda or bourgeoisie propaganda, while non-critically accepting the information they got from their state-published communist propaganda magazines. They will deny reality whenever it is convenient. When they cannot deny the most horrid of crimes, they will shift to defending them. They will never abandon the self-proclaimed socialist nation, no matter how horrible and non-socialist it actually is. Basically, the Tankie is more often than not an authoritarian monster who has no respect for basic ideas such as freedom and democracy. They are sometimes indistinguishable from red fascists and care for nothing but establishing their glorious dictatorship. The Tankie, once in power, will happily purge other leftists out of existence. How could I possibly make such a claim? Because they idolize and defend people who did just that, and openly hold similar sentiments themselves. They are no friend of reasonable leftists, and many of them would see the reasonable left wiped out of existence in a moment if they got the chance. We can expect the sickle to be stabbed deep into our back the second we lower our guard with these people. The flaws of the Tankie are endless. They are optically disastrous, morally abhorrent, highly dangerous, very stupid, and most importantly, not allies. They are nothing but an enemy of any reasonable leftist, short and simple. They make it very clear that they are not supporters of any socialism or communism worth supporting when they defend the worst of nations. If Tankies make us look bad, often hate us, and have completely different goals to us, how can we possibly call them friends, have unity with them, or call them allies in any meaningful sense? The answer is, of course, that we can't. Tankies are not allies, and they are not worth respect, least of all camaraderie, in most situations. Are there some small cases when we could ally with Tankies? Yes. Against Nazis, for example, we could ally with Tankies. However, against the worst of the worst, such as Nazis, we could ally with anyone from ANCAPs and neoliberals and Christian Democrats. Being an ally against Nazis is not a very meaningful distinction. Tankies, for the most part, are not allies. Not in any meaningful way, and they are far closer to enemies than allies.